Hey folks, my name is Jacob May. I'm the cannabis reporter for the State News, and I'm here with PhD student Aaron Staples. Today we're going to discuss the diverse uses of the cannabis plant and a project that he recently received a Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education grant for. So to start, Aaron, can you walk me through what the actual physical differences are between THC, CBD, and hemp?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me, Jacob. So really, a lot of these misperceptions date back all the way to the 1970s when the Controlled Substance Act was passed. And these perceptions still linger through today.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of physical differences, we're really interested in hemp and marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are the two products. Both of them come from the cannabis plant. They're of the same family, essentially. They have different names for different names for the same genus. Okay, so in terms of physical differences between the plants, hemp tends to be taller and skinnier with thinner leaves, whereas marijuana has more dense leaves and is more associated with the flowers and the buds, the dense buds. So if you were to lay the two next to each other, then you'll be able to see some noticeable differences. However, when you observe them in like the marketplace, so in terms of like law enforcement seeing them, you only see one of them. So it's a lot more difficult to distinguish between the two. And that's why we generally look more at the chemical properties, which is where we get into the CBD versus the THC. And in terms of THC and CBD, these are just two of over 100 cannabinoids of the cannabis plant. And cannabinoids are just different compounds within the plant. Okay, so CBD and THC are the most well-known ones, and they're also the one of most interest to the general public. CBD is the non-psychoactive component of cannabis. Okay, so it has no psychoactive effects. It's commonly associated with alleviating joint pain, helping with sleeping patterns. So some medicinal benefits for the CBD. In terms of the THC, that is the psychoactive ingredient to marijuana. Okay, so that's actually going to give the user the high or that euphoric experience. In terms of the allowable allotment of CBD and THC in hemp or marijuana, hemp can have any amount of CBD, but it is limited by law to have less than 0.3% THC by dry weight. Otherwise, it's classified as marijuana.
Okay.
Marijuana, on the other hand, can range in THC content from that 0.3 allowable limit all the way to 30-40% by dry weight.
Okay. And so you mentioned a couple of the uses of the products, particularly for THC and CBD, but in regard to hemp, how is that used?
Well, hemp is a very versatile commodity. Now that it's federally legal to grow hemp, it's used for fiber, for seed, for oils, and even biofuel. So there are a lot of varieties for the different products that it can be used for. But yes, we're more interested in that CBD side of things. So extracting the CBD from the plant and infusing it into different products. So very common CBD products include topical rubs, so things that you'll rub on sore joints, kind of like an icy hot or something like that. There's also lotions. In terms of hemp seeds, you can throw them on salads, things like that.
Oh wow, okay. And obviously we know that they're regulated by the government. So how are the three treated differently in the eyes of the law? Like, especially like in regulation and like the cultivation and sales of the two different plants, or yeah.
For sure, the regulatory landscape around cannabis products is fascinating. So, quick dive through history. 1970, the Controlled Substance Act was passed. What this did is schedule hemp and marijuana as a Schedule I drug, meaning it has no accepted medicinal benefits and it's got the potential for addiction. That meant that there was no legal distinction between hemp and marijuana. Fast forward to 2014, the 2014 Farm Bill started to make a distinction between hemp and marijuana. Okay, so it said that state governments and research institutions, many universities, could start to develop these pilot programs for industrial hemp. Okay, so that was making hemp like an agricultural commodity, no different than corn, soybeans, or anything else. Fast forward to the 2018 Farm Bill, so the next Farm Bill, that made it so you could legally produce, distribute, and sell industrialized hemp throughout the United States. So hemp is legal throughout all 50 states and the District of Columbia, of course. In terms of marijuana, marijuana is still classified in terms of the federal government as a Schedule I drug. Okay. So it's that high potential for abuse with no medicinal benefit. Okay. But states can start to implement their own policy around marijuana, so they can legalize it on their own. In 1996, California became the first state to legalize medicinal marijuana. Since then, roughly 40 states have passed medicinal marijuana legislation. In 2012, Washington and Colorado became the first states to legalize recreational marijuana. And since then, another 16 states and the District of Columbia have legalized for recreational uses. Because all of these changes are happening at the state level, there are differences in all of their policies. So whether you're looking at sales or cultivation, possession charges for minors, things like that, those are all going to depend on the actual state legislation itself, which from policymakers' perspective or researchers' perspective creates these awesome experiments that we can look at, because you can look at the timing of different legislation and the different policies within the legislation and see how the impact of that or what impact that legislation had on not only marijuana use, but also on alcohol use, on other illicit drug use. You can also look at its impact on things like crime or educational outcomes. There's a whole myriad of things that you can look at.
Okay, and so you did mention that at the federal level, they switched up the regulations and definitions for hemp and marijuana. So how does this affect? I mean, of course, this comes with an asterisk of some sorts because it's still you have to be 21 and over to. In Michigan, at least, you have to be 21 and over to use marijuana products. But does that differ for like hemp products such as CBD?
Yeah, that's a great point. So with CBD products, there's no minimum age limit because there's no psychoactive effects. In fact, they even make CBD infused like pet treats. So it's thought of to be a potential benefit for pet health.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. And so we have all of this talk about CBD, hemp, marijuana. And it's a flourishing industry now with the changes in regulations and everything. But can you put into perspective a little bit of how big the cannabis industry really is?
Sure, yeah. So the legal cannabis industry in 2019 generated roughly $17.5 billion in sales. Okay, that's across 14 states that had legalized recreational marijuana at the time, and across the 36 states that had legal medicinal marijuana at the time. In Michigan alone, in 2021, I think it was roughly $1.7 billion of sales. I think there's over 700 different dispensary licenses within Michigan. And I like to joke, so making road trips, I have a few friends down in Indiana. I also drive back from like my home in Massachusetts out to Michigan. So driving up from Indiana or driving up from Ohio, I know I'm getting close to home because I just start to look up and all I see is marijuana billboards.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people have noticed all of that change in the past couple of years. And I guess speaking of big industry, I wanted to touch back a little bit on your project. And I understand that you'll be considering like trade-offs between alcohol by volume, THC, CBD, and kind of outlooking a future for cannabis-infused beverages. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
For sure, yeah. So this is a grant that we got from NCR SARE, and we are super grateful to them for funding our project. Essentially what we want to do is we need to take a step back and look at the alcohol industry and how the alcohol industry has evolved. All of these local craft brewers really started to come around in the last 10 years with this hyper-local movement. Okay? So farmers in areas like Michigan started to see an opportunity to produce local inputs for the local products. So for instance, for beer, producing local hops to supply local beer. Okay, so there was this big opportunity for niche crop production in a lot of the Midwest states. Coinciding with this shift has been an increase in health consciousness, right? So limiting alcohol consumption, things like dry January. But there's also been this legal shift in marijuana laws. Okay, so now hemp has become one of these potential cash crops for farmers. They're subject to boom-bust cycles, where a lot of players enter this market and then all of a sudden the market kind of fizzles out. But one of these options for CBD products, or derived from hemp, the CBD products, is to create infused beverages. So CBD infused beverages, or in terms of with marijuana, states where they have legalized marijuana, is infuse non-alcoholic beers or non-alcoholic ciders with THC. Okay, so we're looking to try to evaluate essentially the total demand for cannabis-infused products. And in doing so, we'll simultaneously see whether marijuana and alcohol are viewed as complements, people like to use them together, or substitutes, whether you can use one or the other. They're easily transferable. You can use one or the other.
Right.
And doing that, we'll also get to essentially the cost that consumers are willing to pay for these products. One of the big problems for cannabis-infused beverages, particularly if they're going to be things like beers or ciders, things that have to achieve some level of fermentation, is you'll need to remove all the alcohol. Okay, so before you can even introduce the THC to it, you need to remove the alcohol. That puts a cost on the producer. So if the producer is going to be doing that, they need to know that the consumer is willing to pay some sort of premium for that product. So not only do we want to see how many people would be willing to buy this product, but we also want to know how much they're willing to pay for that product.
Okay. And so is there any current market for these THC-infused beverages? Are we seeing products like this already?
Yeah, so one instance of this, actually the founder of Blue Moon Brewing Company, his name was Keith Villa, he started a new brewing company called Sierra Brewing Company. Okay, and they brew non-alcoholic beverages, and some of them are infused with CBD, and some of them are infused with THC. Okay, they're based out of Colorado, and they also distribute in Colorado and California. Okay, so there are already products being marketed out there for this. In fact, he wrote a book and published it through Brewers Publication, which is part of the Brewers Association, on brewing with cannabis. And not only does it talk about the scientific method to be able to introduce CBD and THC in a proper way, but it also talks about the regulatory compliance, the labeling laws that you have to come across, and a lot of different factors.
Okay. And so finally, when is your project going to be implemented, and what kind of work does that entail for you?
So we're hoping to start up the survey design this semester, pre-test it through the summer, which means that we want to have people look at it, we want to have hemp producers look at it, we want to have brewers look at it to make sure we're asking the right questions. What questions do they want to know from the consumers? From there, we'll make modifications to our survey, send it out to a representative panel of households, particularly those that consume either alcohol products or marijuana products or hemp-derived products, and have them answer a lot of these different survey questions that we have, which will include an economic experiment where we're able to back out all the things were of interest.
Well, all right. Hey, that all sounds really awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of your project, and I wanted to say thanks again for taking some time to speak with me today. And to everybody who's watching today, thanks for tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah.
Go green.
Go white.